Hey, so you know those glitch moves that are in RBY? That are learned by some of Miss Singno's lovers? And when you use them, sometimes they do nothing, and sometimes they do 65,000 damage, and other times they harm the game when used in a cave. Yeah, it turns out they put one of those in the actual game. It's called Counter. So Counter was a pretty ambitious move for them to try to program in Generation 1, considering that its Bulbapedia description has about a high school research paper amount of words in it, when they were still struggling with getting moves to happen when you use them. But by some miracle, they did succeed in creating the most gamer move. Not just in Generation 1, but maybe of all time. Counter is the one true skill shot available in the game, and causes the most psychological damage to your opponent, by far. You only need to get got by Counter Chansey once, and you'll be using Earthquake Snorlax from now until the fucking bombs drop. But like most of the code babies birthed from Game Freak's programming womb, Counter didn't exactly make it out with all of its fingers and toes, and it does come with some important mechanical distinctions compared to its function in other games. When used in RBY, if the last move successfully executed by your opponent was a normal or fighting type attack which did a non-zero amount of damage, and they moved first when they used it, Counter will deal to your opponent twice the most recent amount of damage received by either player. So these words are kind of fucked up in subtle and not so subtle ways. And no, neither the flag for having been hit by a damage-dealing normal or fighting type attack, nor the amount of damage that's being reflected by Counter are reset at the end of the turn. To which some especially astute gamers might be wondering, well, aren't there like 8 different things that can happen in a turn that aren't doing damage with a move? And you'd be right, but don't worry about it, because Game Freak thought of about 2 of them. Things you can do in a turn that aren't using a normal or fighting type attack which deal a non-zero amount of damage, but which do not also reset the flag of having recently used a normal or fight. Number 1. Using an item. So in the interest of full disclosure, this could very well be using most items, or even using some items, but I'm like pretty sure that it's all of them. On the Glitch City wiki page, it says that this does not work on X Defend because it, quote, has a lower priority. That sounded kind of not right as hell to me, so I tested it against Misty, and it definitely works when they use X Defend. And I also fought Lieutenant Surge, and it works on X Speed, and I fought Giovanni, and it works on Guard Special as well. This is also how I found out that Counter can crit in Gen 1. I did not know that before making this video. Or at least it says it can crit, it doesn't actually do more damage. Either way, this is something that is not implemented on Showdown. I'm pretty sure there's a non-zero chance that I'm the reason why they implemented the stat overflow glitch on Showdown. So Ralph Smoggin, if you're watching this one too, I'm calling you out again. This is the only thing I care about now. Anyway, it also definitely works on healing items because that's what they do in the video that's on the Glitch City wiki page. So I'm gonna call that good enough. It probably works on every item. If you don't consider that due diligence and you really want to know if an AI Pokemon can counter a Pokeball, then please, God, let me know what happens. I'm on the edge of my seat. Obviously, this all only applies in a single-player playthrough and not in PvP. Finally, some counterplay to Bruno. Number 2. Recharging after using Hyper Beam. So this is a fun one. It definitely activates some gamer neurons to whoop Tauros after it Hyper Beams you, and they can't even switch out. And this also comes up a decent amount, at least at like 1100 elo, where people just click the button with Tauros like they're NPCs. I actually put out a bounty in my Discord for someone to switch Nidoqueen into a Tauros Hyper Beam on ladder and kill it with counter. Not only did someone do it almost immediately, a separate unrelated person did it to me on ladder. Which would be really embarrassing for me if a nameless hero didn't destroy the evidence. Number 3. Using the moves Conversion, Haze, Whirlwind, Teleport, Roar, Mist, Focus Energy, Supersonic, Ray, Recover, Boil, Transform, Reflect, These are 25 of the 55 status moves in Gen 1, by the way. Or as Bulbapedia calls them, a select few. Now, counter will always fail if your opponent uses any status move, even if that move fails or misses. These are specifically the moves that you can use after your opponent has already gone first and used a counterable move that will let you use counter next turn, and are basically every non-damaging move that doesn't raise stats, doesn't lower stats, isn't disable, and doesn't cause sleep, even though every other status-causing move is on here. Some of these are a little more impactful than others. Some of them are even learned by a single Pokemon that actually learns counter. The main thing to remember is that counters still being usable after you use Thunder Wave or a recovery move makes Alakazam and Chansey even better. Thank fucking God. Number 4. Switching. So this is how you get the super sweet gamer skill shots if you can predict your opponent switching out. It's pretty easy to bank a normal type move to counter while they switch, considering that about half of the usable moves in Generation 1 are damage-dealing normal type attacks. Obviously, the holy grail is countering your own explosion damage. In the low-tier mons in RBY OU video, I said that Machamp's special Lollipop Dance was being the best Pokemon at countering your own explosion.
Yeah, man, thank you very much, man. That's pretty much all I got, man.
I thought it was funny to say that this terrible Pokemon's niche was doing this thing that sounds fake without explaining it at all. But it's like the coolest shit in the game, so I'm just gonna ruin that now by just saying the words with absolutely no jokes. If you laugh, you will be asked to leave the room. The reason why this works is because my Executor gets hit by the Alakazam Seismic Toss before it uses Explosion. But the damage that is stored is the damage from my explosion on the Alakazam, which is enough to obliterate the Slowbro that they switch in after Machamp forces out the Chansey. This actually took me like 6 hours to do on ladder and is the best thing I've ever done. Ralph Smoggin wants this expunged, but I still have the OBS file from where I used it in a video last time, so this is actually going to be playing at my funeral. Number 5. Sleeping or waking up from sleeping. So spending a turn sleeping or waking up will not reset the active counter damage, but any move that would put your opponent to sleep in the first place will, and you can't Hypnosis something with Hypno and then counter when they switch out. So what's even the fucking point of being alive? This is vaguely unsatisfying for a couple of other reasons as well. For one, if your opponent is sleeping in RBY, you can do whatever the fuck you want that doesn't also make them have to open Bulbapedia in another tab. And for two, when I was explaining how to counter your own explosion in the comments to my last video, I said it definitely does not work if they burn a sleep turn, and it definitely does. How embarrassing.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Number 6. Getting fully paralyzed. Exploiting this is obviously less consistent than your opponent sleeping or switching out, but it actually has far bigger implications on the game. Or at least the real game on cartridge, and not the real fake game on internet. That's because Showdown hasn't actually implemented one of the crucial pillars of the RBY PvP ecosystem, and that is the fight button. What a great button. The opponent sent out Chansey, what will I do? What do you think I'm gonna do, motherfucker? Anyway, in cartridge battles, before you use a move, you have to click the fight button first. But the information given to the two cartridges in a link battle from the fight button is asymmetrical.
I'm playing both sides so that I always come out on top.
Specifically, your cartridge will record moves that you hover over in the fight menu, but not the ones that your opponent will hover over in theirs. So like, if they have a paralyzed Alakazam that seismic tosses your Chansey, and on the next turn they click Psychic and you click Counter, but their Alakazam gets fully paralyzed, the counter will succeed on your cartridge because the last move the Alakazam hit you with was Seismic Toss, but on their cartridge it will fail because the game thinks the last move they used was Psychic, even though it wasn't actually executed. And this of course causes the game to have an existential crisis and desyncs the hell out of the battle. The situations that cause this desync are actually reasonably likely to come up organically in a battle, and are even easier to fabricate. But instead of implementing desyncs on Showdown or just banning the move counter, they just made it to where when it would desync a game, it just doesn't do it anymore. Most people are okay with this because RBY Counter is kind of sick as fuck and adds more to the game than it takes away. But the greasiest person you know is probably pretty upset by this decision. Me, personally, I think that the RBY implementation of cartridge mechanics is kind of all over the place, and I do feel some ways about it, but I guess that's a conversation for another time. Or maybe I'm just gonna start making Monster Rancher videos.